Hey gang, it's Squill, and we finally made it. My final review of Fionna and Cake Season 2. Let's just get on with it. The Bear and the Rose is the 10th and final episode of Fionna and Cake's second season. The bear likely represents Witch Wizard, who turned into a bear back in Simon Petrikov, and the Rose is representative of the heart of the forest. This episode opens up with one of my favorite scenes of the entire season, a flashback between Finn and Minerva sometime around when the human city was being built. Their interactions here are so sweet. There's an obvious disconnect between them, with Minerva not being fully human, but it's obvious that these two still care so much about each other, with Minerva setting up a date for Finn after having previously sent him with a Minerva bot in a wig, and Finn protecting her data from the Burger Mites. But this disconnect also foreshadows the conflict of the episode brilliantly, as it's made clear here that Finn loves living his life as a human, and as much as he loves his mom, wouldn't want to live like her. This scene does kinda remind me of the Simon and Ice Thing stuff in The Cat Who Tipped the Bots, in the sense that it kinda just makes me want a full episode between Finn and Minerva. But going into the season, I never expected we'd get a scene like this in the first place, so I'll take what I can get. After the intro, we cut to Minerva's room in present day, where we are preparing to upload Finn. In saying that the machine is supposed to crush Finn's body, I never thought that's what happened to Minerva, but maybe they just weren't allowed to show it on Cartoon Network. I do really like how unsure everyone is about this plan to upload Finn's intelligence. There's a scene later in this episode where Simon talks about how trying to preserve Finn like this might be more insulting to him than anything else, and it just feels very real to conversations I've seen about generative AI. The way PB talks about it too really makes it feel like a last resort. It's just cool to see how much care and consideration Finn's friends take in his life. It makes a line Fionna has to him later in the episode feel all the more impactful. Speaking of Fionna, we then cut to her as she returns to Fionna World and sees Gary and Marshall reacting to the sweet spot being destroyed. I like, on paper, that Gary and Marshall don't immediately forgive her, but in execution, I find this scene super awkward. I think it's the fact that they just immediately walk away the moment Fionna apologizes without even saying anything. I wish we got to see the two actually get mad at Fionna, or even just question why she destroyed the sweet spot, because the way the scene plays out as is feels very unrealistic. After this, Fionna overhears Hunter and Fennel talking about Fionna kissing DJ Flame. I really like the contrast between their conversation here and the one they had in The Worm in His Orchard, where this time Fennel is more angry at Fionna and Hunter is looking at things from her perspective. Based on her dialogue here and a couple moments later in the episode, it definitely feels like Fennel is more upset about Fionna betraying her than Felix. Possibly due to her having romantic feelings for Fionna, but as I've said before, I feel like I just don't really get what the show is going for with Fennel. I know a lot of people don't really like the concept of Fionna and Fennel getting together because they're based off of Finn and Fern, who are kind of the same person. I don't really mind that all too much, because Fennel obviously exists within a different context than Fern. I just wish I understood why Fennel feels the way she does about Fionna, why she admires her so much, and why she may or may not have a crush on her. If we weren't jumping between so many different storylines and characters, I definitely think she would have gotten more development. Meanwhile, in the Undergrowth, we see Huntress Wizard trying to find her way back to Ew. We get a pretty fun payoff to her seeds being spread across the multiverse back in the Crocodile Who Bit a Log, with her regrowing in each one of the universes she landed in. We return to some universes from Season 1, such as Vamp World, Farm World, Baby World, and Wintercane World, the latter of which being my favorite just for the sheer absurdity of that world's slime princess making out with that world's Finn. But we also get a couple of new universes, such as a sci-fi planet-looking one that has a pretty neat design. But more interestingly is this flooded universe with a creature that bears a striking resemblance to Finn's design when he sees himself back in Don't Look. Except this being is blue and has what appears to be the ice crown on. Perhaps this is a version of Finn who put the ice crown on and found the hermit's eyes? And perhaps the eyes have overpowered the crown, causing his eyes to melt. I mean, technically, we saw the eyes overpower the crown at least physically when Finn turns Ice King back into Simon. But that's just speculation. I really hope we do get to see more of this universe at some point, because I'm very intrigued by it. And of course, I love all of Huntress Wizard's new designs for these universes, with my favorite being either Vamp World or Farm World. But unfortunately, none of Huntress Wizard's seeds spread throughout the multiverse land her back in Ooh. But speaking of Ooh, it was cool to see the pups at Finn's kind of funeral. Partially because it's the first time we've seen most of them since the original series, but also partially because we know Finn got closer to at least some of them sometime after Come Along With Me. So it's just cool to see them still by Finn's side. But speaking of cameos, these characters pale in comparison to Finn's closest family member. That, of course, being Nectar. Hell yeah. All jokes aside, this cameo is awesome. Hype moments and aura all the way. I have a lot of fondness for Nectar as a character, and I'm so glad he got to make his first appearance since Come Along With Me. And I'm glad he got to make it for what was almost his Poppy's final day. The Jake fake out was funny because it kinda double faked me out. I totally thought this was gonna be Jermaine at first, but the fact that he doesn't show up here means that he's probably dead by now. Poor Jermaine. I really like the design of PB's new robot body for Finn. Reminds me a bit of the arm she made him from the tower. Back in the Undergrowth, Witch Wizard is able to connect to the heart of the forest through Finn. It was cool getting a bit more Johnny Pepper's animation in this sequence, even if it was a good amount shorter than their last one. Back in Ooh once again, hearing PB and Marcy sing the Sleepy Puppy song as they prepare to download Finn always gets me in the feels. Definitely helps that I have that song memorized. This is interrupted, however, by Huntress Wizard bursting out of Finn in a pretty cool sequence. Quite like her new design here. What follows is a pretty awesome sequence of Huntress Wizard combining her alternate universe selves to save Finn. Music here is fantastic, one of my favorite tracks in the entire season. I also gotta love the joke of Farm World Huntress Wizard dying in front of her kids. These poor children. It's a brief moment, but I absolutely love PB's little panic attack after she realizes she almost killed Finn. It's a moment that feels really well built up after all the stress she's been dealing with this entire season. You really just feel the weight of it all crashing down on her, and it helps that we rarely ever see PB like this. The only thing that really comes close is her big breakdown scene back in Varmin's, which I've also always really loved. Just always great to see PB's more vulnerable side break through. However, while Finn's body is restored, his consciousness isn't all there yet. So Huntress goes back to the Undergrowth to ask Cake to ask Fionna for help. I like this because it re-solidifies that Cake doesn't have to choose between the two halves of herself. She can be there for both Fionna and the Karmic Worm. Speaking of Fionna, I actually really love the scene between her and Felix. It just feels so emotionally mature. Fionna realizing that her feelings for Felix don't override the fact that they're just not a healthy couple. Felix is definitely still a bit of an asshole here, trying to ask out Fionna, but to his credit, he at least backs off when Fionna rejects him. It'd be so easy to write him as an over-the-top womanizer like, say, Biff from Back to the Future, but I'm glad the show doesn't do that. After this, Cake returns to inform Fionna about what's going on with Finn. And if you didn't think this episode was fanservice-y before now, well, just you wait. Because as Fionna enters Finn's mind, she is greeted with a Bellamy bug. A character whose only other appearance is in Season 1's Rainy Day Daydream. Talk about a glup shitto. Truth be told, I don't even really think this scene needed to be here. Fionna could have just woken up in Finn's headspace, but I'm not complaining about it. When we do enter Finn's headspace, however, Fionna finds a hole hidden by the poster we saw back in The Bird and the Clock. And inside that hole, we get an absolute barrage of references to episodes of the original show. We see inside the well from Dentist, the entrance to Pillow World from Buhoy, this hallway in Castle Lemongrab from All Your Fault, the monster's stomach from Belly of the Beast, the ziggurat from Three Buckets, the candy tree's roots from Bonnie and Eddie, another shot inside the well from Dentist. I guess someone working on this episode really loves that one. And finally, the Lich's Well of Power from Mortal Folly. After this, Fionna lands in Finn's heart, and I absolutely love the design of this place. The homey aesthetic, warm color palette, and soft music just makes for such a comforting vibe. I absolutely get why Finn's consciousness would hide here. Finn and Fionna's talk here makes for what is probably my favorite scene in the entire season. The Bird and the Clock gave us the novelty of seeing Finn and Fionna fight alongside each other. But this episode gives us a full heart-to-heart between the pair, and man does it feel good. The scene even parallels the talk Finn and Fionna have in that episode really nicely. Whereas in that episode, Finn told Fionna she needs to listen to herself. Here, Fionna tells Finn that what she really needs is to listen to other people. Hell, I even buy the Fionna and Huntress connection here. If Fionna has to take anything away from the very few interactions she has with Huntress, then I think learning to communicate from her bad example totally works. And man, seeing Finn so depressed that he needs to hide away in his own subconscious just really hits for me. And obviously we've seen Finn depressed in the main show before. But this scene hits even harder with the context of Jake's death, as well as the fact that we're seeing this through the perspective of a different character. Fiona's line about how there are a lot of people waiting for Finn up there hits really hard as well, given how many people we just see there for Finn in this episode and throughout the season. I love the decision to use Finn's original series design here. This and Together Again make it a pretty consistent trait that as an adult, Finn often age regresses back into his younger self. Which makes sense because that's when he had Jake. Gotta say, Jeremy Shada has not missed a beat with Finn's voice here. He sounds like he could've come straight out of season 10. It's an amazing scene overall. For as messy as the season is as a whole, I think it was totally worth it for a moment like this. Through talking with Fionna, Finn is able to gain consciousness back in Ooo. It's a very sweet moment, but I do wish we got a bit more out of Finn and Huntress Wizard here. I think it's a little weird that we don't get at least one full conversation between them. Especially given Huntress's resentment towards Finn's recklessness we saw back in The Bird and the Clock. I at least like Finn moving in with her, I think that's cool. But still, considering how much of Huntress's arc this season revolves around Finn, it's kinda strange how little the two actually get to interact. And despite how much I love her big breakdown scene, I kinda feel the same way about PB. Like I've said before, PB spent almost the entire season stressed out about Finn. Would have been nice for her to at least talk to him a little bit. Do something where she gets a little mad at Finn for how much stress he's put her under, while still showing that she cares about Finn and is glad he's okay. I still like her sobbing uncontrollably, but I wish we got that and an actual interaction between her and Finn. But speaking of PB, we also get this weird moment where Marcy takes her crown off and puts it on Pep's head, which is obviously an allusion to him being the new princess as we see in Together Again. Pep even mentions later in the episode that come graduation he'll have a kingdom to feed. It's just weird that what should feel like a big moment for both him and PB happens so casually like this, to the point where if you only watch the episode once, you could miss that it even happened at all. I just think this should have been a bigger decision, made in a story that's actually focused on PB. Does PB even agree to this? Marcy is the one who takes her crown, it's so weird. We then cut back to Fionna World after this, where we get a very nice scene between Cake and Emkron. I obviously still wish we got more between these two, but this scene is admittedly very sweet. I'm glad Cake and Emkron can still be friends. It's kinda interesting that not every couple we see in Ooo necessarily ends up working out in Fionna World, as Fionna and Hunter also don't end up getting together, despite Finn and Huntress making it official the very same season. I like this though. I think it's more interesting that not everything that happens in Ooo is bound to happen in Fionna World. Back with Fionna, we get her second attempt at an apology to Gary and Marshall, in a scene I have very mixed thoughts on. On the one hand, I do really like her making food for Gary and Marshall, even if it ends up being awful. It's sweet, and shows that she did learn something from Gary's flashback back in last episode. It's also really funny that she broke in through the window in order to do this, and even funnier that she was prepared to climb back out. But I still feel like Fionna gets let off a little too easily here. I am fine with Gary and Marshall forgiving her, but I wish they still held on to at least a little bit of their resentment for her. Even if they still sympathize with her and understand what she's going through. It just feels a little too easy for my liking. This is really the only episode of the season where it feels like Huntress's plotline gets enough screen time and Fionna's ends up suffering. But even worse is with Fennel, whose conversation with Fionna we don't even hear because it happens over a montage. It's so weird, I would have taken a half-ass scene between the two over no scene at all. And then the next time we see the two, Fennel's leaning on her shoulder. How we went to this from Fionna making out with her boyfriend is just beyond me. In our final Huntress scene, we see her teaching green magic to a bunch of wizards. I don't really have a ton to say about this, but I like it. It's a nice little showcase of Huntress's growth, even if how we actually got here leaves a lot to be desired in my opinion. We then get a very random scene of Spirit Dream Warrior watching over Astrid, with I guess the implication being that he's going to teach her magic of some kind. Okay. In our final Fionna scene, we finally learn what the Venusian meant by going beyond the end of the peak, as Fionna, Cake, Hunter, and Fennel venture beyond the city. It's a pretty intriguing idea for a potential Season 3, essentially being Fionna's equivalent to the Islands miniseries. I also love the final shot panning out of Earth, really cool. And that was The Bear and the Rose, an overall really strong finale. Wait, what? There's still more to the episode. Okay. So after the credits, we get one last scene of Marcia Lee singing. It's a pretty nice song, and holy crap, is that Fionna World Tree Trunks? And Hudson Abadir! So yeah, this is a pretty intriguing cliffhanger to end the season on, teasing a potential Season 3, focusing on Hudson Abadir and I can only presume Marceline and PB. My only guess as to what Hudson wants with Marshall is that maybe he wants him to be the new heir to the Nilosphere, just like he wanted from Mercy back in Return to the Nilosphere and Daddy's Little Monster. The biggest thing I want out of a Hudson-focused season is some backstory between him and Elise. But that's all speculation for a season that, honestly, might not even happen. But that's a whole can of worms we'll open at a later date. For now, The Bear and the Rose is a fantastic finale. It's not perfect, as some of the Fionna stuff is a little messy, but this episode absolutely succeeds in feeling like a celebration of Finn as a character, as well as Adventure Time as a whole. And I think the highlights of this episode are not only S-tier moments of the season, but of the franchise as a whole. It is a mostly very satisfying finale to a very clunky season of television. And that was The Bear and the Rose. We're not quite done talking about Fionna and Cake Season 2 yet, as I still have my ranking, but man am I glad to be done reviewing each of the episodes. I am exhausted. But with that, please let me know your thoughts on this episode in the comments, and I'll see you all for the ranking. Have a good one, and Squill out.